Welcome back to Footnotes Folly and to Josephus's Antiquities. I am Pemberton. This is Book 12, Part 2, and it is a tangle of kings, priests and money. We watch the great kings of the age, the Seleucids of Syria and the Ptolemies of Egypt, court the Jews, grant them privileges, and fight their wars across Judea, which has the bad luck to lie on the road between them. Antiochus the Great makes generous decrees. The worthy high priest Onias nearly ruins his people by stinginess with the tribute. And into that gap steps one of Josephus's most vivid characters, Joseph, the son of Tobias, charming, ruthless, and brilliant, who talks his way into the tax farming of the whole region at the Egyptian court and makes a fortune, and whose youngest son Hyrcanus is even sharper than he is. It is a worldly, almost comic interlude before the storm. Let us take up the story.
The Jews also received honors from the kings of Asia when they became their allies. Seleucus Nicator gave them citizenship in the cities he founded in Asia, in Lower Syria, and in the chief city itself, Antioch. He granted them the same privileges as the Macedonians and Greeks who lived there, and these privileges have continued down to the present day. One proof is this: because the Jews do not use oil prepared by foreigners, they receive from the proper officials connected with the athletic exercises a sum of money equal to the value of that oil. During the last war, when the people of Antioch tried to take this payment away from them, Euergetes, who was then governor of Syria, preserved it for them. Later, when Vespasian and his son Titus ruled the inhabited world, the people of Alexandria and Antioch petitioned to have the Jews' rights as citizens taken away, but they did not get what they asked for. In this one can see the fairness and generosity of the Romans, especially of Vespasian and Titus. Although they had gone through great hardships in the war against the Jews, and were angry with them, because they would not surrender their weapons but carried the war on to the very end, they still did not take away any of the civic privileges already granted to them. They restrained their anger and rejected the requests of the Alexandrians and Antiochians, even though those peoples were very powerful. They did not give way either out of favor toward those cities or out of old resentment against the Jews whose stubborn opposition they had overcome in war. They would not change any of the ancient favors granted to the Jews, but said that those who had taken up arms against them and fought them had already been punished, and that it would not be just to deprive those who had committed no offense of the privileges they enjoyed. We also know that Marcus Agrippa had the same attitude toward the Jews. The people of Ionia were very angry with them and begged Agrippa that they alone might enjoy the rights of citizens which Antiochus, the grandson of Seleucus, who was called the god by the Greeks, had granted them. They also asked that if the Jews were to share those rights with them, they should be required to worship the same gods that they worship. But when these matters were brought to trial, the Jews won their case and received permission to continue using their own customs, with Nicolaus of Damascus acting as their advocate. Agrippa gave judgment that he could not introduce a new change. Anyone who wants exact knowledge of this matter may read the 123rd and 124th books of Nicolaus's history. As for Agrippa's decision, it is not so surprising, because at that time our nation had not made war against the Romans. But one may rightly be astonished at the generosity of Vespasian and Titus, who, after such great wars and conflicts with us, still acted with such moderation. I will now return to the part of my history from which I made this digression. During the reign of Antiochus the Great, who ruled all Asia, the Jews, together with the inhabitants of Celesyria, suffered greatly, and their land was severely harassed. While he was at war with Ptolemy Philopator and with Ptolemy's son, who was called Epiphanes, these nations suffered in either outcome, both when Antiochus was defeated and when he defeated the others. They were like a ship in a storm, tossed by waves from both sides. In the same way they stood between Antiochus's success and the reversal of that success into trouble. At last, when Antiochus defeated Ptolemy, he seized Judea. After Philopator died, his son sent a great army under Scopas, the commander of his forces, against the inhabitants of Celesyria. Scopas captured many of their cities, and especially attacked our nation, which went over to him when he came against them. Not long afterward, however, Antiochus defeated Scopas in a battle fought at the fountains of Jordan, and destroyed a large part of his army. Later, when Antiochus subdued the cities of Celesyria that Scopas had taken, together with Samaria, the Jews voluntarily went over to Antiochus. They received him into Jerusalem, supplied abundant provisions for his whole army and for his elephants, and readily helped him when he besieged the garrison in the citadel of Jerusalem. Therefore Antiochus thought it only just to repay the Jews for their diligence and zeal in his service. He wrote to the generals of his armies and to his friends, testified to the good conduct the Jews had shown toward him, and told them what rewards he had decided to grant them for that conduct. I will shortly set down the letters he wrote to the generals about them, but first I will present the testimony of Polybius of Megalopolis. Scopas, the general of Ptolemy's army, hurried to the upper parts of the country and during the winter overthrew the nation of the Jews. When Scopas was conquered by Antiochus, Antiochus received Batanea, Samaria, Abila, and Gadara. A little later, the Jews who lived near the temple called Jerusalem came over to him. Although I have more to say about this, especially about the presence of God around that temple, I will put that account off until another opportunity. This is what Polybius relates. But I will return to the course of the history after first giving the letters of King Antiochus. Greetings. Since the Jews, as soon as we entered their country, showed friendship toward us, and when we came to their city Jerusalem received us splendidly, came out to meet us with their senate, gave abundant provisions to our soldiers and to the elephants, and joined us in driving out the Egyptian garrison that was in the citadel, we have thought it right to reward them. We also intend to restore the condition of their city, which has been greatly depopulated by the misfortunes that have fallen on its inhabitants, and to bring back to the city those who have been scattered abroad. First, because of their piety toward God, we have determined to grant them, as a regular allowance for their sacrifices, animals fit for sacrifice, wine, oil, and frankincense, to the value of 20,000 pieces of silver, also 6 sacred artabri of fine flour, 1,460 medimni of wheat, and 375 medimni of salt. I want these payments made to them in full, as I have ordered you. I also want the work on the temple completed, along with the cloisters and anything else that ought to be rebuilt. As for timber, let it be brought to them tax-free from Judea itself, from the other regions, and from Libanus. The same is to be observed for any other materials necessary to make the temple more glorious. Let all the people of that nation live according to the laws of their own country. Let the senate, the priests, the scribes of the temple, and the sacred singers be exempt from poll money, the crown tax, and all other taxes as well. So that the city may recover its inhabitants more quickly, I grant freedom from taxes for 3 years to its present residents, and to those who come to it until the month Hyperbaratus. We also release them for the future from a third part of their taxes, so that the losses they have suffered may be repaired. As for all citizens who have been carried away and made slaves, we grant freedom to them and to their children, and we order that their property be restored to them. These were the contents of this letter. Antiochus also published a decree throughout all his kingdom in honor of the temple. It said that no foreigner was allowed to enter within the limits surrounding the temple, something forbidden even to Jews except those who had purified themselves according to their own custom. No flesh of horses, mules, or asses was to be brought into the city, whether the animals were wild or tame, nor the flesh of leopards, foxes, or hares, and in general no flesh of any animal that the Jews were forbidden to eat. Their skins were not to be brought into the city either, nor was any such animal to be bred there. They were to be permitted to use only the sacrifices handed down from their forefathers, by which they were required to make acceptable atonements to God. Anyone who violated any of these orders was to pay the priests 3,000 drachmae of silver. Moreover, this same Antiochus bore witness to our piety and loyalty in a letter he wrote after being informed of a revolt in Phrygia and Lydia. At that time he was in the upper provinces, and he commanded Zeuxis, the general of his forces and his most intimate friend, to send some of our nation from Babylon into Phrygia. The letter was as follows. Greetings. If you are in good health, it is well. I also am in good health. Since I have been informed that a revolt has arisen in Lydia and Phrygia, I have judged that this matter requires great care. After consulting with my friends about what should be done, it has been thought proper to move 2,000 Jewish families, together with their possessions, from Mesopotamia and Babylon to the fortresses in the most suitable places. I am convinced that they will be well-disposed guardians of our possessions, because of their piety toward God, and because I know that my predecessors have testified that they are faithful and willingly do what they are asked to do. Therefore, although it is a difficult undertaking, I want you to move these Jews under the promise that they will be allowed to use their own laws. When you have brought them to the places mentioned above, give each family a site on which to build a house, and a portion of land for farming and for planting vines. Release them from paying taxes on the fruits of the earth for 10 years. Let them have a suitable amount of wheat to maintain their servants until they receive grain from the land. Also give a sufficient share to those who serve them in the necessities of life, so that, by enjoying the effects of our kindness, they may prove more willing and ready in our affairs. Take care of that nation as far as you are able, so that no one gives them any disturbance. These testimonies that I have presented are enough to show the friendship that Antiochus the Great bore toward the Jews. After these events, Antiochus formed a friendship and alliance with Ptolemy. He gave Ptolemy his daughter Cleopatra as his wife, and handed over Cilicia, Samaria, Judea, and Phoenicia to him as her dowry. When the taxes were divided between the two kings, the leading men of each country arranged the taxes for their own regions, collected the amount assigned to them, and paid it to the kings. This time the Samaritans were prospering, and they greatly troubled the Jews by cutting off parts of their land and carrying away slaves. This happened while Onias was high priest. After Eleazar died, his uncle Manasseh took the priesthood. After Manasseh died, Onias received that dignity. Onias was the son of Simon, who was called the Just, and Simon was the brother of Eleazar, as I have said before. This Onias was small-minded and very fond of money. Because he failed to pay the tax of 20 talents of silver, which his forefathers had paid out of their own estates, he angered King Ptolemy Euergetes, the father of Philopator. Euergetes sent an ambassador to Jerusalem, complained that Onias was not paying his taxes, and threatened that, if he did not receive them, he would seize their land and send soldiers to live on it. When the Jews heard the king's message, they were thrown into confusion. But Onias was so meanly greedy that nothing in the situation made him ashamed. There was then a man named Joseph, young in age but highly respected among the people of Jerusalem for dignity, prudence and justice. His father's name was Tobias, and his mother was the sister of Onias the high priest. She told Joseph that the ambassador had come, for Joseph was then staying in the village called Fickle, where he had been born. So he came to Jerusalem and rebuked Onias for failing to care for the safety of his countrymen, and for bringing the nation into danger by not paying the money. Joseph told him that he had received authority over the people and had been made high priest for the purpose of preserving them. But if he loved money so much that he could bear to see his country endangered, and his countrymen suffer the greatest losses because of it, then Joseph advised him to go to the king and ask him to cancel either the whole amount demanded or part of it. Onias answered that he did not care about his authority, that he was ready to lay down the high priesthood if that could be done, and that he would not go to the king, because he did not trouble himself at all about such matters. Joseph then asked whether Onias would allow him to go as ambassador on behalf of the nation. Onias replied that he would allow it. Joseph then went up into the temple, called the people together in assembly, and urged them not to be disturbed or frightened because of his uncle Onias's carelessness. He asked them to remain calm and not terrify themselves with fear about the matter, for he promised that he would serve as their ambassador to the king, and would persuade him that they had done him no wrong. When the multitude heard this, they thanked Joseph. He then went down from the temple and received Ptolemy's ambassador hospitably. He also gave him rich gifts, feasted him splendidly for many days, and then sent him ahead to the king, telling him that he would soon follow. Joseph was now more willing to go to the king because the ambassador encouraged him, strongly urged him to come into Egypt, and promised that he would make sure Joseph obtained from Ptolemy everything he desired. The ambassador had been greatly pleased by Joseph's frank and generous character and by the dignity of his conduct. When Ptolemy's ambassador arrived in Egypt, he told the king about Onias's thoughtless character and described Joseph's good disposition. He said that Joseph was coming to excuse the people, since they had done the king no harm, and that Joseph was their patron. In short, he praised the young man so fully that he made both the king and his wife Cleopatra well disposed toward Joseph even before he arrived. Joseph then sent to his friends in Samaria and borrowed money from them. He prepared everything needed for the journey, garments, cups, and beasts of burden, amounting in all to about 20,000 drachmae. Then he went to Alexandria. It happened that at this time all the principal men and rulers from the cities of Syria and Phoenicia were going up to bid for the farming of their taxes, because every year the king sold those taxes to the most powerful men in each city. When these men saw Joseph traveling on the road, they laughed at him for his poverty and low condition. But when Joseph came to Alexandria and learned that King Ptolemy was at Memphis, he went up there to meet him. The king was sitting in his chariot with his wife and with his friend Athenion, the same man who had been ambassador at Jerusalem and had been entertained by Joseph. As soon as Athenion saw Joseph, he immediately pointed him out to the king and told him what a good and generous young man he was. So Ptolemy greeted Joseph first and asked him to come up into his chariot. As Joseph sat there, the king began to complain about the way Onias had handled matters. Forgive him because of his age. You surely know that old men and infants have minds much alike. But from us who are young men, you shall have everything you desire, and you shall have no reason to complain. The king was so delighted by the young man's good humor and wit that he began at once to feel an even stronger affection for him, as if he had already known him for a long time. He ordered Joseph to take his meals in the royal palace and to be a guest at his own table every day. But when the king came to Alexandria, the leading men of Syria saw Joseph sitting with the king, and they were greatly offended. When the day arrived on which the king was to lease out the taxes of the cities, and the men of highest rank in their several countries were to bid for them, the total amount offered for the taxes of Cilicia, Phoenicia, Judea, and Samaria came to 8,000 talents. Joseph then accused the bidders of having conspired together to value the taxes too cheaply, and he promised that he himself would give twice as much for them. He also promised that, for anyone who failed to pay, he would send the king all that person's property, since this right was sold together with the taxes themselves. The king was pleased to hear this offer, and because it increased his revenues, he said he would confirm the farming of the taxes to Joseph. But he asked Joseph whether he had any sureties who would be bound for payment of the money. I will give such security, and from persons who are good and responsible, and whom you will have no reason to distrust. When the king told him to name who they were, Joseph replied that he would give the king no other persons as sureties than the king himself and his wife, and that they would be security for both parties. Ptolemy laughed at the proposal and granted him the farming of the taxes without any sureties. This caused bitter grief to those who had come from the cities into Egypt, for they were completely disappointed, and each of them returned to his own country in shame. Joseph took with him 2,000 foot soldiers from the king, because he wanted assistance in forcing those in the cities who were stubborn to pay. He also borrowed 500 talents from the king's friends at Alexandria, and hurried back into Syria. When he came to Ascalon and demanded the taxes from the people of Ascalon, they refused to pay anything and insulted him as well. So he seized about 20 of the leading men, killed them, gathered together all their property, sent it to the king, and informed him what he had done. Ptolemy admired the man's prudent conduct, praised what he had done, and gave him permission to act as he pleased. When the Syrians heard this, they were astonished. Having before them the grim example of the men of Ascalon who had been killed, they opened their gates, willingly admitted Joseph, and paid their taxes. when the inhabitants of Scythopolis tried to insult him and would not pay him the taxes they had formerly paid without dispute, he also killed the leading men of that city and sent their possessions to the king. In this way Joseph gathered great wealth and made immense profits from farming the taxes. He used the fortune he had gained to support his authority, thinking it prudent to preserve the very means that had caused and founded his present success. He did this with the help of the wealth he already possessed, for he privately sent many gifts to the king, to Cleopatra, to their friends, and to all who had power at court, and by this means he bought their goodwill for himself. Joseph enjoyed this good fortune for 22 years. He became the father of 7 sons by one wife. He also had another son, named Euergetes, by the daughter of his brother Ptolemy, whom he married in the following way. Joseph once came to Alexandria with his brother, who had brought with him a daughter already old enough for marriage, intending to give her in marriage to one of the most distinguished Jews there. Joseph then dined with the king. During the feast, an actress of great beauty came into the room, and Joseph fell in love with her. He told his brother about it and begged him to conceal his wrongdoing, since a Jew is forbidden by their law to have relations with a foreign woman. He asked his brother to be kind, to assist him, and to give him an opportunity to satisfy his desire. His brother willingly agreed to serve him in this. He adorned his own daughter, brought her to Joseph by night, and placed her in his bed. Joseph, being disordered by drink, did not know who she was, and lay with his brother's daughter. He did this many times, and loved her exceedingly. He told his brother that he loved this actress so much that he would risk his life if he had to part with her, though the king would probably not give him permission to take her with him. But his brother told him not to be concerned about that matter. He said Joseph could enjoy the woman he loved without danger, and could have her as his wife. Then he revealed the truth to him, and assured him that he had preferred to let his own daughter be treated in this way rather than neglect Joseph and see him fall into public disgrace. Joseph praised him for such brotherly love, married his daughter, and by her had the son named Euergetes, as we said before. When this youngest son was 13 years old, he showed a mind that was both courageous and wise, and his brothers greatly envied him, because his ability was far above theirs, and was the kind of ability they had good reason to envy. Joseph once wanted to know which of his sons had the best inclination toward virtue. He sent them one by one to the men who then had the best reputation for teaching youth. The rest of his children, because of their laziness and unwillingness to work hard, returned to him foolish and uneducated. After them he sent out the youngest, Euergetes. He gave him 300 yoke of oxen and ordered him to go 2 days' journey into the wilderness and sow the land there, while secretly keeping back the yokes that fastened the oxen together. When Euergetes arrived at the place and found that he had no yokes with him, he blamed the ox drivers, who advised him to send men to his father to bring yokes. But Euergetes thought he ought not to lose time while they were being sent for and brought back. So he devised a plan more suited to someone older than himself. He killed 10 yoke of the oxen, distributed their flesh among the laborers, cut their hides into several pieces, made yokes from them, and yoked the oxen together with those hides. By this means he sowed as much land as his father had ordered him to sow, and then returned to him. When he came back, his father was greatly pleased with his intelligence. He praised the sharpness of his understanding, and the boldness of what he had done. Joseph loved him still more, as if Euergetes were his only true son, while his brothers were deeply troubled by it. Someone told Joseph that Ptolemy had just had a son, and that all the leading men of Syria and of the other countries under Ptolemy's rule were going to Alexandria in great companies to celebrate the child's birthday. Joseph himself was kept from going by his old age, but he tested his sons to see whether any of them would be willing to go to the king. His older sons excused themselves, saying they were not skilled enough as courtiers for that kind of company, and they advised him to send their brother Euergetes. Joseph gladly accepted their advice. He called Euergetes and asked whether he was willing to go to the king and whether the journey pleased him. Euergetes promised that he would go, and said he would not need much money for the journey, because he would live moderately, and that 10,000 drachmas would be enough. Joseph was pleased with his son's good sense. A little later, Euergetes advised his father not to send gifts for the king from home, but instead to give him a letter to his steward in Alexandria, so the steward could provide money for buying the finest and most precious gifts. Joseph thought 10 talents would be enough for presents to the king, praised his son for giving sound advice, and wrote to Arion, his steward, who managed all his financial affairs at Alexandria. Joseph had no less than 3,000 talents deposited there, because he sent the money he received in Syria to Alexandria. When the appointed day came for paying the taxes to the king, Joseph would write to Arion to pay them. So after Euergetes asked his father for a letter to the steward and received it, he quickly set out for Alexandria. After he left, his brothers wrote to all the king's friends, urging them to destroy him. When Euergetes arrived at Alexandria, he delivered the letter to Arion. Arion asked how many talents he wanted, hoping he would ask for no more than 10, or perhaps a little more. Euergetes said he wanted 1,000 talents. The steward became angry and rebuked him as someone intending to live extravagantly. He reminded him how his father had built up his estate through hard work and by resisting his own desires, and he urged Euergetes to imitate his father's example. He assured him that he would give him only 10 talents, and those for a gift to the king. Euergetes was angered by this, and threw Arion into prison. Arrian's wife told Cleopatra what had happened and begged her to rebuke the young man, for Arrian was highly regarded by her. Cleopatra then told the king. Ptolemy sent for Euergetes and said he was astonished that, although Euergetes had been sent to him by his father, he had not yet come into his presence, but had instead put the steward in prison. He therefore ordered Euergetes to come before him and explain why he had done this. They say that Euergetes gave the king's messenger this answer. There is a law among his people that forbids a child who has been born to taste the sacrifice before he has gone to the temple and offered sacrifice to God. In the same way, I did not come to him because I was waiting to bring the gift due to him as my father's benefactor. I punished the slave because he disobeyed my commands, for it makes no difference whether a master is small or great. Unless we punish such men, you yourself may expect to be despised by your subjects. When Ptolemy heard this answer, he laughed and admired the greatness of the young man's spirit. When Arrian learned that this was the king's attitude, and saw that he had no way to help himself, he gave the young man 1,000 talents and was released from prison. After 3 days had passed, Euergetes came and greeted the king and queen. They received him with pleasure and entertained him graciously, out of respect for his father. Euergetes then privately went to the merchants and bought 100 boys who were educated and in the prime of youth, paying a talent for each one. He also bought 100 maidens at the same price each. When he was invited to dine with the king among the chief men of the country, he sat in the lowest place of all. Those who arranged the guests placed everyone according to rank, and they gave Euergetes little honor because he was still young. Now all those sitting near him took the flesh from their portions and piled the bones in front of Euergetes, until the table where he sat was filled with them. Trypho, the king's jester, who was appointed to make jokes and laughter at festivals, was asked by the guests at the table to make Euergetes a subject of ridicule. So Trypho stood beside the king and spoke. Do you not see, my lord, the bones lying beside Euergetes? From this likeness you may guess that his father stripped all Syria as bare as he has stripped these bones. The king laughed at what Trypho said and asked Euergetes how he came to have so many bones before him. Euergetes answered, Quite properly, my lord. Dogs eat the flesh and the bones together, as these guests of yours have done, for there is nothing left before them. But men eat the flesh and throw away the bones, as I, who am also a man, have now done. As he said this, Euergetes looked toward the guests. The king admired the wisdom of his reply and ordered everyone to applaud as a sign that they approved of his truly witty answer. The next day Euergetes went to each of the king's friends and to the powerful men at court and greeted them. At the same time, he asked their servants what gift their masters would give the king on his son's birthday. Some said their masters would give 12 talents, while others of higher rank would each give according to the amount of his wealth. Euergetes pretended to each servant that he was distressed because he could not bring so large a gift, saying that he had no more than 5 talents. When the servants heard this, they told their masters. The masters were pleased at the prospect that Joseph would lose favor and make the king angry by the smallness of his present. When the day arrived, the others, even those who brought the greatest gifts, offered the king no more than 20 talents. But Euergetes gave each of the 100 boys and 100 maidens he had bought a talent to carry, and brought them in, the boys to the king and the maidens to Cleopatra. Everyone, including the king and queen themselves, was amazed at the unexpected richness of the gifts. Euergetes also gave gifts worth a great number of talents to those who attended the king, so that he might escape the danger he faced from them, since these were the very people to whom his brothers had written, asking them to destroy him. Ptolemy admired the young man's generosity and commanded him to ask for whatever gift he wanted. Euergetes asked nothing from the king except that he write to his father and brothers about him. So the king showed him very great honor, gave him very large gifts, and wrote to his father, his brothers, and all his commanders and officers concerning him. Then he sent him away. When Euergetes' brothers heard that he had received such favors from the king, and was returning home with great honor, they went out to meet him in order to kill him. Their father knew of this, for he was angry with Euergetes, because of the great sum of money he had spent on presents, and he had no concern for his son's safety. Still, Joseph hid his anger toward his son because he feared the king. When Euergetes' brothers came to fight him, he killed many of those who were with them, and also killed 2 of his brothers. The rest escaped to their father at Jerusalem. But when Euergetes came to the city and no one would receive him, he feared for his life and withdrew beyond the river Jordan. He stayed there and forced the barbarians to pay their taxes. At this time Seleucus, called Soter, the son of Antiochus the Great, ruled over Asia. Euergetes' father Joseph died. He had been a good man and very noble in spirit, and he had raised the Jews from a poor and low condition to a more splendid one. He held the farming of the taxes of Syria, Phoenicia, and Samaria for 22 years. His uncle Onias also died about this time, and left the high priesthood to his son Simeon. When Simeon died, his son Onias succeeded him in that dignity. It was to this Onias that Arius, king of the Lacedaemonians, sent an embassy with a letter. This is its copy. Arius, king of the Lacedaemonians, sends greetings to Onias. We have found a certain writing by which we have discovered that both the Jews and the Lacedaemonians are of one stock and are descended from the kindred of Abraham. It is therefore only right that you, who are our brothers, should send to us about any of your concerns as you please. We also will do the same, and will regard your concerns as our own, and will consider our concerns as shared with yours. Immortals, who brings you this letter, will bring your answer back to us. This letter is four-sided, and the seal is an eagle with a dragon in its claws. These were the contents of the letter sent from the king of the Lacedaemonians. But after Joseph's death, the people became divided and rebellious because of his sons. The older sons made war against Euergetes, the youngest of Joseph's sons, and the people were divided, though the greater part joined the older sons in this war. Simon the high priest did the same, because he was related to them. Euergetes, however, decided never again to return to Jerusalem. He settled beyond Jordan and was constantly at war with the Arabians, killing many of them and taking many captives. He also built a strong fortress entirely of white stone up to the roof, and had animals of enormous size carved on it. Around it he dug a large and deep canal of water. He also hollowed out a rock opposite him, and made caves many furlongs long, then formed large rooms within them, some for feasting and others for sleeping and living. He brought in a great quantity of water, which flowed through the place and made the courtyard very pleasant and beautiful. Yet he made the entrances at the mouths of the caves so narrow that only one person could enter at a time. He had a good reason for building them this way. It was for his own protection, in case his brothers besieged him, and he was in danger of being captured by them. He also built courts larger than usual and adorned them with very large gardens. When he had brought the place to this condition, he named it Tyre. This place lies between Arabia and Judea, beyond Jordan, not far from the country of Heshbon. Euergetes ruled those regions for 7 years, during the whole time that Seleucus was king of Syria. When Seleucus died, his brother Antiochus, called Epiphanes, took the kingdom. Ptolemy, king of Egypt, who was also called Epiphanes, died as well. He left 2 sons, both young. The older was called Philometor, and the younger Whiston. As for Euergetes, when he saw that Antiochus had a great army, and feared that he would be captured by him and punished for what he had done to the Arabians, he ended his life and killed himself with his own hand. Antiochus then seized all his property.
And we will halt there, with the Tobiad family rich and powerful, and Judea seemingly secure under its Greek overlords. But money and influence are about to give way to something far darker. The high priesthood, which should have been above all this, becomes a prize to be bought, and the man who buys it will open the door to a king who means to destroy the Jewish faith entirely. Next time, in Part 3, the corruption of the high priesthood, the terrible persecution of Antiochus Epiphanes, the desecration of the temple, and the old priest Mattathias who finally says no, and lights the fuse of revolt. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.